Welcome to The Drummer's Pathway, the podcast about music, life, and the creative process. Hello, I'm Michael Scott, and welcome to the Drummer's Pathway podcast, where I sit down with drummers, educators, and artists who talk about the creative and professional journeys that shape their lives. This episode features my conversation with drummer Herman Matthews. Born and raised in Houston, Texas, Herman began his musical journey at age 7 and went on to become one of the most in-demand drummers in the business. Now based in LA and celebrated for his powerful and soulful groove, he is known for his work with Tom Jones, Tower of Power, Kenny Loggins, Timothy B Schmit, Hugh Laurie, Richard Marx, and many more. In 2022, Herman founded the progressive blues rock and soul band Phatback, Earl, and Me. In this episode, we talk about his early inspirations, his take on why simplicity matters, and look back on some of the career-defining moments he's had. And now, let's get started with my conversation with Herman Matthews. So when I look at your career, you have had a stellar reputation for someone that is not only passionate about their craft, but has mastered the perfection of groove and making the music feel really good. And that's one of the reasons why you have been so much in demand for the last few decades. And so I'm really looking forward to getting into a bit of your story and getting into some of your philosophies and your perspectives about what it really takes to both start a professional career and to maintain a professional career amongst the changes within the industry of which I think you have had to navigate many times throughout the decades. And so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
It'll be great. Sure. Definitely.
You were originally raised in Houston, which has a really deep history in terms of funk and R&B traditions. So growing up in that environment, how much of that really inspired your perspective in terms of what you do?
Wow. Okay. When growing up playing music in Houston, I started out playing in my uncle's organ trio. Literally, I was a kid. I was, 11, 12, 13 years old. And basically played slow blues and shuffles all night long. Houston was a wonderful place to grow up playing when I did, because it wasn't overloaded with musicians, but they had great musicians. So my learning was from people who either had been touring and came back to Houston, or people who had been, making a living and doing wonderful things out of Houston, out of Texas. So groove was sort of pounded into me. And when I say groove being pounded, I would be playing, and if I went to do a fill, I would get, don't do that. And that was at an early age. And also listening to music on the radio, or even records, I didn't hear drum solos, or I didn't hear a lot of big fills at that time. Everything was, to the point, making it feel good, keeping people dancing. That was the thing. So when I played with people like Arnett Cobb and my uncle, Jimmy Ford also, everything was basically about, like if I was playing jazz, playing the swing beat or playing the jazz beat. It wasn't so much about the fills and bringing attention to me. It was about just keeping the whole thing on the rails, So I don't know, and that stuck with me. throughout playing soul, funk, R&B, rock and roll, even country music. And like I said, when I would hear that music or the music that I loved on radio, I didn't hear a lot of drum fills. So my heroes were people like Earl Palmer and Al Jackson Jr., on those earlier records. I mean, even the Motown stuff, everything had a purpose. I had a lane to stay in. And that kind of sort of stuck with me. It made total sense to me.
One of the things that I find really interesting about the music of that era is that sometimes the production quality wasn't always the best. And so we grew up listening to how the song felt without sometimes really having the fundamentals of hearing all the different parts, because sometimes that stuff didn't always carry through. We had to embrace how the music felt and then later on analyze why the music felt that way. And we got into the music at a much deeper level. Whereas I think sometimes people look at music as a platform to showcase musicianship. And I think musicianship should be something that is used to embrace what the music is about in terms of things, because that's something that is a learned skill as one develops as a player.
I agree. It is something that is learned, I guess. But once again, during that time, and you're right, listening to music, it was a different thing. It was, once again, everyone had a role to play.
Yes.
And it's almost like, I would always equate what I did with Latin music. You had your conga player, you had the guy playing bongos, you had the guy playing the cowbell, you had all of that to create one sound.
Yes.
And that's what soul music was for me. I mean, you had a lot of things going on to create one. And that was the deal. When you would play a shuffle, you didn't want any other elements getting in the way of that motion.
I think, when you say look at the music of James Brown, I think one of the reasons why that music is so iconic is, once again, every part has its place, and it's a puzzle that gets connected to create the ultimate picture of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And I think when people respect that each individual piece is essential and look at the big picture, then the collective collaboration of everything has that much more of an impact. It's when everyone comes in and they try and ram their own pieces into it because they got something to say and it's about them and not the collective, that's when music doesn't resonate the same way.
Correct. When I'm teaching my students, and I don't mean private teaching, I mean I teach a performance class.
Yes, okay.
I'm trying to let them know that there's a foundation, and there's that people depend on that foundation to dance on. And when I say dance, play over. If you're playing behind the soloist, I mean, there's a couple of ways, I guess. I mean, either you lay down a foundation and let that person skate all over it, but you're there for them, or you can move with them, which wasn't really my take on it. I didn't really agree with that. My thing was that I'll be here when you get back.
Yes,
you have something. You have something to lean on. And you can do whatever you need to stretch it. Come back to rub up against it. But I'm here. I did a gig last night with Elise Sklar, the bassist, and it was a wonderful rhythm section because everyone thought that way. It was about just pocket. It was about, as Jeff Beccaro would say to me, just keep them dancing. And so that was the goal, making it feel good. I mean, sure, everyone had their solos that they played. And even when Lee did his solo, the band stopped and he just got up and started talking.
Yeah.
Basically just saying, I hate bass solos. And he told a story and then counted the band back in, so that was his thing.
When I'm teaching students that are, going through the development stage, one of the things that I often tell them is that you can determine the impact of what you're playing when you're playing an audience, when you watch people's faces. If people are not responding to what you're doing, then you're not making a connection. So what you need to do is you need to find the connection, have them pay attention, and now you can have the conversation. And you might feel like you want to show off a little bit because that's all part of the development that we all go through. Yeah. But it comes down to make that simplicity. So like we talked about, the dance floor. I often find that if, on nights when I feel like stretching a little bit more, I simplify the bass drum part and I simplify the kick drum part, keep that fundamental very simple.
Right.
Now people can respond to that. And now, because they're responding, I have some space amongst that where I can embellish, but I understand that the significance of my role is still those fundamentals. And I remember having a conversation once with a student who always liked to play things quite busy, but he was quite accomplished. And I said to him, that was fantastic. You can play that groove again, but you can play one bass drum note. Choose wisely. Because he was always just playing so many random things that I'm like, you have to understand placement. So you can pick one place to put that bass drum note. So listen to the context of what you're trying to do and determine where that one note that I'm allowing you is going to enhance the thing that you're trying to say. Right. And then at that point, they start to pull things back and start to pay attention to those fundamentals.
Well, once you take yourself out of the equation, in other words, if you stop thinking, dig me, dig me, and this, honor the music, honor the song, then it starts to make sense. I did a showcase with the artist Kevin Moore.
Okay.
Kevin Moore, yeah. And the first thing he did when he walked in, when he was hearing us rehearse, he said, okay, everyone, cut what you're doing in half. Just simplify everything. And he had a point, because then there was a canvas for him to play what he needed to play. And he's a simple player himself. He tells more of a story than tries to, to impress you with my lick, or here's the lick I'm going to show you. I always tell people, when you find yourself playing something, a lick, a fill, something of that nature, and you catch yourself, when you look up to see if anyone is responding to your fill, then you're missing the point. It reminds me of the story when I got with Tower of Power, and the leader of Tower of Power would say, the drummer who I replaced, he said he could always tell, the leader could always tell when a drum company or when an endorser was in the club for the drummer, because all of a sudden he just started playing more notes and started playing bigger fills and kind of sort of got away from the song. And I really don't understand that, and I think that's just because of my upbringing, where I never really played for me. I played for everyone else, So.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a huge Tower of Power fan. And I was listening to the second album that you did with them last night. And one of the things that I loved about them is that, the time in the band when you were in the band has a different vibe than when Russ McKinnon was in the band. And then, of course, all of the iconic stuff with David Garibaldi, which I love. But I think one of the reasons why what works so well for David and what works so well for you is that it's you. You're putting yourself into a situation where you understand the significance of that chair and that role, but they hired you to be you and to embrace the collective once again. So you and David Garibaldi are very different players, but you can put your take on his stuff is beautiful because you do it in your own way. And I think that's something about respecting the music and respecting the role.
Well, that's the deal. I mean, there was someone, I remember this, we're playing in San Diego, Tower of Power. And someone after the show came up, just said, who is this guy? Who is this drummer who thinks he's David Garibaldi? And I was like, no, I don't think I'm David Garibaldi. I'm playing the gig, like I play the gig. But you have to play the parts. When you're playing What Is Hip, or when you're playing Squid Cakes, or any of those songs, there was a part that David Garibaldi came up with. So you have to play that because that's part of the song. That doesn't mean I'm trying to be David Garibaldi. Mm-hmm. I just have to play what's there, He made it easy on that part, and I always think, I don't think I could ever come up with something that amazing. And that's what makes David Garibaldi David Garibaldi, So I don't know. Rocco used to say when different drummers would sit in, the thing that he would say about me, and I'm kind of patting myself on the back for this. Rocco said, you understood the bump of Tower of Power. And what he meant by that was that there was a certain groove that they had. And you didn't have to play like David, or you didn't have to play like Russ. You didn't have, there was a certain thing that you understood. And when playing with Rocco, when he's pumping those 16th notes in the way that he does, all you have to do is just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can play. And Rocco's going, and then that's Tower of Power. That's what they consider being a soul band. And then every once in the end, to take it up a step, I would, and then lay that over. It just made sense, just get out of the way.
I think one of the things that we learn throughout our career is at first we're told be a master of all styles and be able to be marketable in every different aspect. And we all know that the music that we grew up with is the things that fuel who we are as an artist. And I think as we get further into our career, we start to embrace the opportunities that are about us. And that's not an ego showcase sort of thing, but we tend to start to realize that it's not always about just filling the calendar, but it's about finding the experiences of which we have something to offer that is going to really truly benefit them. And that can be sort of part of the challenging part of a professional career, is sometimes letting go of the need just to take everything and starting to realize that you're better to put your energies into the things that are that feed your soul and feed your spirit.
I'm still trying to learn that, because I do have a problem saying no, and it's because, I'm making a living,
yes, for sure.
I miss, I'll say it this way, I don't tour as much as I used to. I miss that. I loved touring. I loved being the foundation of a touring band. Those gigs are just not out there. And, the other thing is that more drummers are hanging on to gigs. I mean, there's only so many Steve Jordans out there, and he's not going to give up the Rolling Stones gig, so it's that thing, so I don't know. Yes, I do have to be, I am picky and choosy about the gigs that I take, but also too, I got to keep the lights on.
Oh, for sure.
I got to keep the food on the table, so.
But when I do reflect on what I've seen you do throughout your career, you're bringing yourself to the gig. and you're
Right.
bringing your passion to the gig. And
Right.
so when you're hired for that, you have your presence there, and you're owning that. And I think that is essential, because we've all seen people who make professional careers who are there, and you can tell that there's a disconnect, and
Yeah.
they don't want to be there. And unfortunately, the nature of our industry is we have to make a living.
Right.
But I
Right. Right. Right.
think that when you look at the experiences that you've had, I think it's very inspiring that you've been able to bring something special to it, and you've got a presence to you that really helps to bring and fuel that joy and that live experience.
Well, someone once said, he says, "Man, you do so many different kinds of gigs." And what they're saying is that, I was playing with Tower of Power.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the total opposite end of the spectrum, I was playing with the bassist Timothy B. Schmit of the Eagles, And so, Timothy is a very gentle, very nice balladeer, if you will, with I guess, the not soprano voice, but with the high voice that he has. So you take those two gigs, one that's busy, if you will, and then the other one where there's a lot of space. And then you take me playing with Tom Jones or me playing with Kenny Loggins, and it's still me.
Yes.
And I'm really not changing up when I'm playing. I'm just playing what the song is telling me to play. It's almost like, God, we always have the conversations. I wouldn't want to hear Buddy Rich playing with the Rolling Stones.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to hear Charlie playing, or Charlie Watts playing with, Parliament Funkadelic. So once again, you kind of mold yourself into playing with the group or playing the song. When I would write music and I wrote songs for Tower of Power, I was thinking Tower of Power. When I'm trying to write or doing things, say for Timothy B. Schmit or writing with him, I'm thinking simplicity. I'm thinking beauty. I'm thinking, different colors, if you will. So it's, I don't know, survival. It's surviving. That's what it is.
I had the great pleasure to see you perform live with Tom Jones on 3 different occasions.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was always blown away by your performance. But that's also a gig that has different eras and different aspects to them. So you need to be you, but you also need to represent the early days of this era and some of the more contemporary, almost electronic-based stuff that he was doing later on in his career. So what was that experience like, working with Tom for those? I think it was about 7 years you played with them.
About 7.5, 7 to 8 years, something like that. One of my favorite gigs to play. One, because Tom was a drummer, so we had a certain connection. But the beautiful thing about his music, he had a hit in every decade, and what was wonderful was that I would carry, I think, 5 to 6 snare drums with me and change them out depending on the decade where the song came from. So, when I would play something in the 60s from Tom Jones, that was totally different than playing something in the 80s with Tom Jones. So it was a wonderful experience musically because of that. And trying to wrap. Tom did different things, everything from, contemporary songs to standards,
Yes.
So it was musically one of the finest gigs I ever had.
You worked with him around sort of the same time as sort of the Tower of Power era. So at that point, you were comfortable playing in a larger ensemble where, in addition to holding down the groove, you also had to help play off of the horns and help respect the different parts as well too. And I think you understood your role very well in that situation.
Most definitely. I mean, playing with horns is totally different than playing with a smaller group. In fact, when I was with Tom Jones, I had, but I was subbing for David Garibaldi on some things, and there was an opportunity for Tower of Power and Tom Jones to be on the same bill. And it just so happened that David couldn't do a week of Tower dates. So what I would do, I would play with Tower of Power, because they were on the gig first or on the show first, and then go, get some water, get a towel, and then play with Tom Jones. So I did both of them, which was, for me, I was in heaven. It was wonderful. Because in one evening I was playing all kinds of grooves and different kinds of music. But once again, I was me,
Yes.
I was me playing that, so, yeah, I've been fortunate. I've been blessed.
No, your mother was from Louisiana, I believe,
Oh my goodness, yes.
and you spend a little bit of time in your upbringing in Louisiana, as opposed to also spending some time, and I believe in Alaska. So you got moved around a lot. But
wow.
coming from Louisiana, you were exposed to a lot of the music that was sort of part of that environment. And then later on, one of the artists that you got to work with was Hugh Laurie, who actually had a passion for blues music and that type of vibe. So growing up in that scenario, was it quite easy to adapt in that situation when that opportunity came along?
Well, with my mom being from Louisiana and my dad being from Texas, we lived in Houston, Texas, which was only, a few hours, a little more from New Orleans or from the whole Louisiana thing. So, yeah, the whole Texas music, which had the Louisiana thing into it, it was, not saying it was easy, but it was in the blood,
Yes.
We understood what we understood what gumbo was, and we understood what barbecue was, so it was all part of that. Yeah, I was fortunate in that. The crossover, or not even crossover, it was just all what it was. But understanding the difference in the fields, and the whole Louisiana thing, which is, a market within itself where magnificent musicians come from. And then there's the whole Texas thing where magnificent musicians come from. So I was lucky. I was fortunate. Indeed.
And how did the Hugh Laurie gig come about?
Okay, so Hugh Laurie, which you were saying that with him, loving the blues and the whole New Orleans vibe. He adored Professor Longhair from New Orleans or from Louisiana. So every day he was doing something like that. And one of his passions was to do a record, was to record that music. The drummer that he had used was Jay Bellerose, who not only a fantastic drummer, but an incredible human being. Jay did the first tour off of the first record, and I think was out quite a bit. I mean, they were out for 2.5 years or something like that. And Jay just had too much stuff going on at home to ignore that by going on the road. And so he had suggested to them, to Hugh Laurie, that there's a drummer named Herman Matthews who can play the styles that you're looking for. And they came out to a club that I was playing, and on the break, pulled me aside, started talking, and next thing you know, I was on the road with Hugh Laurie for the next 4 years. And Hugh, a fine entertainer, a funny individual,
Yes.
and actually, he was a good piano player. I mean, he played the hell out of that thing. He played that music well. And so that second record, I want to say, I think the first record, they did a lot of things out of New Orleans, and the second record was just continuing that sort of thing. So it was fun. It was fun.
Now, Hugh, it's funny because when you look at someone like that who's known as a comedian and an actor, that's really how people know him. When he
Yes.
comes out and does this musical project, it's a passion project for him, something that he really wants to experience. And often for people in that situation, they take it very seriously because it's not something that's going to be the main aspect of their career. And so sometimes you have people in those situations that will put out music or different sorts of projects because it's a marketing thing, not a passion thing. So I think that's one of the reasons why that project was so critically acclaimed and successful for what his intention was.
Well, it was funny. I was speaking to Hugh about that, and he would always get bugged because he wanted people to come out to see him for his music.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, yeah, but Hugh, they don't know you as a musician. I mean, they know who you are as an actor.
Yes.
So if you can get them into the venue, if you can get them to buy that ticket because of your acting, and then have them leave, with joy because of your musicianship and music, then you won.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it was always, I was trying to always convince him that, man, you're a wonderful musician, and people are going to leave there. As a matter of fact, some of those youngsters who were fans of House and fans of his acting, they became blues fans because of his music. And I'm still in touch with some of those young people today, because they've gone on to see the other things that I've done.
Yeah.
But they are blues fans because of Hugh Laurie. So music is a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Now, going back a bit, you attended a high school for the performing and visual arts in Houston.
Yes, sir.
We often start out as musicians just playing along with music and just finding our way. And then we get into a little bit more of a formal environment. How did that experience help shape who you are as a musician today?
Probably more so than anything else. And what I mean by that, I was surrounded, every school day with amazing musicians, all either my age, younger, older, just this was high school, and it was I always say it was the second school after the New York, performing arts school. But really, if you count the three schools in the performing art in New York, they all melted together. This is really the fourth, I guess, in Houston. Amazing teachers, and the reason why we couldn't compete in competition, we can always be critiqued. But the reason why we couldn't compete was because we were getting professional help. Once again, my teacher, eventually was Dr. Robert Morgan. We call him Doc, Flugel Bob. The person who started that program was Ed Trongoni. And once again, I owe everything musically to that education, meaning that, learning to read, learning to write, learning, my theory, which I wish I would have paid more attention in high school. But learning all of that I did in my high school years. And I did go to Interlochen as well for a summer. So I was really fortunate in my music education. I'm saying all that to say, when I had the opportunity to go to college or to go to university, I didn't. I did have scholarships. I had an opportunity to go out on the road or to join the Airmen of Note Air Force Big Band. Auditioned for that, made the band, but did not get into the Air Force. So once again, my education was from the high school, from the performing and visual arts.
Yeah.
And my foundation on all of that to this day is what that was all about. I'm very proud of that school. I even, I'm always bragging that, drummers like Chris Daddy Dave, he went there. Robert Glasper, the piano player, he went there. what is it? I think he's won 5 Grammys and all that. And I brag on that. But also I must say, when Robert Glasper, I should say it this way. I graduated the high school for the performing and visual arts in 1979. Robert Glasper was born, I think, in 1978. So yes, a long time ago, I went to the performing arts school. But still, to this day, I credit it for my musical upbringing, my musical training.
Often when we look back at our educational development and our experiences, we've had mentors or experiences throughout our lives that had a specific impact. Are there any particular mentors that you've had or specific experiences or lessons that you had learned that really had a huge impact on you?
Wow. Well, I do have to let you know that even my junior high school band director, Ann Price, she was very, I'm not saying she was hard on me, but she gave me opportunity. Mm-hmm. And she taught me quite a bit. And when I say she was, I say hard on me. I mean, I was a knucklehead kid in junior high school, and she made sure that my path was that I was on the path to making good music, I guess, or being a good musician. She's responsible for me getting into Interlochen, making sure that I auditioned and made that happen. But yes, mentors. Wow, pretty much everyone in Houston that I played with, and I say that because when I was 16 years old, playing gigs and playing, with the likes of Cy Brinson and with Paul English and with, just Ornette Cobb. Once again, the whole Houston musician scene was just thick with talent and with mentors. As you say, G.T. Hogan, one of the great Spangling drummers or bebop drummers that played with Miles Davis. Those are guys who I hung out with. But and then later becoming friends and listening to guys like Charlie Drayton, who was, I guess, the protege of Steve Jordan's. Those are, I would hang on every word. I would hang out with them and just kind of sit there and listen, with bated breath, if you will. Everyone that I grew up playing with, I learned so much from, so yes, as I tell kids always, listen to everything. And when someone is saying something to you that you admire, hold on to that, make it work. I hate saying it this way. I was a Billy Cobham fan for about a good week.
Okay.
What I mean by that, the way Billy played, the way Billy, expressed himself on drums. I think for a week I wanted to try and do that until I found out that I could not, but he was someone at a very early age came out to hear me play. And the advice that he gave me, priceless. He told me, he says, man, I really enjoy the way you play. He says, when you're doing your drum fills, just relax and breathe. Mm-hmm. And so when he said that, to this day, when I'm doing a fill that we all tend to,
yeah,
and then do the fill. I always remember what Billy says, breathe and go through it, and and then it will land closer to the groove than not.
If there's something that I've learned over the years, it's that sometimes the music that most speaks to us or that we're most passionate about, when we finally get an opportunity to play in an emulation stage, sometimes the music is something that we feel the biggest disconnect with, because we start to realize the things that we thought were the things that inspired us weren't necessarily the technical aspect of what we played, but it might have been the spirit of which they played. So for an example, in terms of Billy Cobham, you get caught up in the technical aspect of it. And then you realize afterwards there's something else about what he's doing that I'm really gravitating towards. And it's the fact that it's his spirit, it's his passion, it's his dedication, and it's his commitment to his artistic vision. And that's what you can take away. And then you start to realize that some people's artistic voice is very busy, and some people's artistic voice has a lot of space. And if your voice has a lot of space, filling the space starts to disconnect you from the things that you're passionate about. And that's really part of the experience, because it's like, I love the Police and I love Stuart Copeland's playing, but I often find I'm not really that interested in emulating everything that they did note for note. I just want to play in the spirit of. When I embrace the spirit of the artist, then there's that much more joy, because you can still start to put your own character and your own voice into that, because that's their voice. And although we're sometimes in professional situations where we're called upon to emulate someone else's voice, we get the most satisfaction being in a situation where we can incorporate their style into our voice.
And which I still think today that we had an advantage by not having YouTube. Because we would listen and we would create and do what we thought they were doing. Me being a huge Steve Gadd fan, for instance, what I took away from Steve Gadd was his groove and his space. Not so much the inverted paradiddles and all of the things. I mean, he was a rudimental genius. He is a rudimental genius. But like what Dave Weckl took from him and what Benny took from him, the thing I took from Steve Gadd was that sort of thing, instead of the, but you're right. And my take on what Steve Gadd did, because of me listening and not so much watching it on YouTube, that helped me create a certain thing for me, so yeah.
So for someone that is being called upon to play in so many different situations, whether it be a live situation or a studio work, when you walk into a room for the first time with people that you may not have had a connection with before, how do you approach that situation to both feel comfortable and to determine how you can bring the best of yourself to whatever it is that they're looking for? Because sometimes before you even play a note, you've already had to start figuring out the situation. So what's your approach, or what's your experience been like in those scenarios?
Well, and when I walk into a place, say I don't know anyone, or even if I do, but I don't know what the song is. I never walk in with some preconceived, okay, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to blow somebody away. I'm going to do this. I'm always thinking of structure and always thinking of how am I going to fit into this situation. So I always call it the lowest common denominator is to sit back and just play 2 and 4. And then add flavor onto that. And then that's sort of what I've become, when people say I'm the groove guy. When I hear Billie Jean, Ndugu, Chancellor playing, Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, he's playing the money beat from beginning to end. Now, I don't know if that was what the demo was, or if that's just what he heard, or someone said, look, give me that. But it works. You know what I'm saying? And usually in my classes, that's the first song that I teach everyone, because you have someone like Ndugu Chancellor, who is, a fusion funk guy, playing with everyone from Santana to, George Duke and Herbie Hancock and Patrice Rushen, and, and playing the whole fusion kind of thing, to literally just playing so I always hope that I can get a session where all I'm doing is that. But I just always try and make it feel good. without thinking, oh, I'm going, I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to do it that way. So I don't know. Even, I mean, I think the one thing, I did a session with Ron Carter once when I was playing with Kirk Whalen. And it was just a ballad with brushes, but I was more, nervous playing in front of Ron Carter.
Yeah.
Than, like, wow, here's this, the guy, but I always found if I just, stick to my guns and play, what I think is the, right thing to play, I guess, it always worked out better, and I wasn't trying to, hey, Ron, dig me, look at what I'm going to do, but just listening, to what all of the people are playing and playing the song and you reacting, which is what music is anyway,
If you learn to respect the other artists in the room, they are now going to take more notice of you, and you're going to have much more opportunity to have some amazing musical conversations. But if you're not interested in them because it's all about you, they've already disconnected with you.
Yes.
One of the things that I was curious about, we already brought up his name earlier on, is I've talked to a number of people that have had the great pleasure of working with bass icon Leland Sklar, of which you've had the pleasure to work with on numerous occasions.
Yes.
What is your connection with Leland in terms of what it's like working together, and what has your experiences like being able to work with him in so many situations?
What I love about Leland is the fact that he listens. The very first time I played with him, and once again, here I am, this kid, I'm sort of nervous because Leland Sklar is on this gig that I'm playing. So we're playing with the artist Richard Marx, and we're playing a ballad. And I'm listening to Leland, and because I'm trying to respect where Leland is coming from, I'm finding that he's doing the same thing with me. So I'm kind of laying back, trying to find where everything is, and didn't want to overplay. And I'm laying back with Leland, and Leland is listening to me. And so he's listening to drums. And so now he's laying back. And so we're both laying back and trying to find each other's groove. And the next thing you know, the song is getting slower and slower and slower. And then it dawned on me, okay, wait, someone has to take the lead here, but as soon as I got over that, it became a beautiful working relationship, because I would just go in and just play, the time where I thought it was, and he would jump on my back or stay right where he is, and we would work with each other. And it's happened that way with everything that I played on with him. He's one of those guys who's very musical, and he respects where everything is. Time, once again, I look at time as a margin, like here and here, and everything within that margin is good time. Now, if you play above that, you're rushing. If you play below that, you're dragging. If everyone has the understanding that you're playing within this here, then you have some wiggle room, and you have, you can do all kinds of things with that, in that frame there. So Leland does that extremely well.
When you look at some production things, sometimes the music that has the most impact is often the stuff where they put performance over perfection. And I think with the nature of how so much music is created these days, which isn't a criticism, it's just the reality of things, how things are done, is everything is put onto a grid, and everything, because the focus of perfection becomes the main focus of everything. And I think when you take a step back and realize that music should have some breath and some space to it, and allow that to breathe, then that's the perfection. And I think
it's a conversation.
Exactly. Because that's how people communicate with each other. That's how emotions are. When everything is always just so clinical, it might have its impact in certain contexts, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really about the performance of the artists.
And also, I go out with the attitude, what can I do to help or make other players sound better? What can I do to make it easier for them to do the thing that they do? So I don't know. It's so far it's working for me.
For someone that has had such a prolific career for so long, which I find very inspiring, you probably find that a lot of the up and coming, people, the next generation come up and ask you for advice in terms of how they should approach or get started in a career. So what's the type of advice that you would share to people that are earlier on in their journey?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say what the kids have done with drumming today is amazing. It is outstanding. I listen to young drummers and I listen to things that they do. Things that I would never ever think of. My goodness, but also too, I try to let the younger drummers, who are aspiring to be those drummers. Yep. I say, look, I'm not that guy that says, look, you have to just play meat and potatoes. You have to play just, 2 and 4. I'm not that, but I do want them to understand the beauty of that. And that is music as well. I want all of the kids to eat, if you will, both the white meat and the dark meat of the chicken. Yeah. I want them to love all of it, but just know when to do certain things. To understand that there's a time to play 2 and 4 and groove, and then there's a time to put that inverted paradiddle that starts off with the left foot, bounce off the cowbell, nothing but net lick. There's a time to do all of that. And I think music today, it is so broad to where you can make both of those things happen. And also, as I've always said, even, the advice that was given to me, listen to everything. Just listen to everything. And that's the reason why, I love everything from Coltrane and Rachmaninoff to P-Funk and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Tedeschi Trucks Band. I love all of that because it's all music and it all touches my heart. So.
I've always believed that it's essential to, as you said, listen to lots of types of music, not necessarily because you need to love all types of music, but you need to explore things. And there may be aspects in music that you don't care for that actually resonate with you, that you can take that and apply it to something else. And much like the food in Louisiana, this gumbo of cultures and different sort of things, music should be like that. You should be a culture or a gumbo of your listening and collective experiences. And it's through those exposures that you start to learn who you are. Because sometimes music that doesn't resonate with you at one point in your life becomes the music that you suddenly become very passionate about later on. When you have one foot in the history and the foundations of that music, and then you take your other foot that is your creative exploration, you combine them, that's really that makes you the most valuable as a player, because it's about respecting all of the musical situations that you're put into without losing who you are as an artist.
Well, it's so funny. I mean, every time, in my class, we always end up talking about food in some sort of way, just like you did. So it's like, you have the different foods and the different flavors from the different regions of the country. The food from Florida is different. They're different from the food in Portland, say, for instance, and there's everything. Like there's 4 regions of barbecue, even. Just like it's that thing, or even the whole difference between a Texas shuffle and a Chicago shuffle, a double shuffle, a stumble shuffle, a one-legged hippo shuffle, if you will. A bouncy C shuffle,
Yes.
Bouncy shuffle. There's all kinds of things. And like I said, one of my heroes, one of the guys I grew up with, Earl, or grew up listening to, Earl Palmer, they would ask him, he'd say, Earl, give me a second line groove. And he would say, well, what ward do you want it from? Everyone has like one or two, or mainly one second line groove. Earl Palmer can do a second line groove from different parts of the city, and they would all be different, and so that's the way I think everyone's playing should be. Just don't get into the thing that you just love.
Yep.
But get into everything. Get into, it's all about, we are fortunate enough to be playing music, and even more fortunate enough to express ourselves through drumming, playing music. So it's a beautiful thing.
Now, you are a very well-rounded player, and you have dabbled into, songwriting and lyric writing and all of these different things that really not only help you have a creative outlet, but also allow you to connect in a deeper level with the other people that you work with. And in 2007, you actually released a solo record called Home at Last, which was, I've heard you say, it's kind of a reflection of the music that inspired or influenced you, which essentially is what brought you home. And I know it was not your intention originally to do a solo record, but I believe it was a producer that you were affiliated with essentially put this project on you. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
Well, this producer, Ned Albright, and who piano player, songwriter, singer, had, if you remember the band, the Archies.
Yes.
He sang on that. He played piano on that. He being the producer that he is, he had a rhythm section, and that rhythm section was Dean Parks on guitar and Leland Sklar on bass, myself on drums, Doug Pettibone also on guitar, and so we would do his records. And one particular day, Ned asked me, he says, "When are we going to do a record on you?" And I was like, and so I was on the road, and I started thinking of songs because I didn't really know what kind of record to do. Do I do a funk record? Do I do a drummer's record? Do I do a rock record, a soul record? Or, what kind of record do I do? So I kind of started digging in my past. And, started looking at the different kinds of things, different kinds of music that I was really into. And I started writing. And I sang on all of the record, which he didn't think, he didn't even think about that, So I'm no singer by no means. I am not a singer. But there were, some of my favorite songs are songs with vocalists. Mm-hmm. And I love playing music behind vocalists. I love playing with singers. That's a complete song to me. So I started writing things like that, and everything from a spoken word tune called "I Am a Drummer from Texas" to the New Orleans thing, "I Got a Home," who Trombone Shorty played on. Everything from all of that to this funk tune called "Junk in the Trunk," who I had Ivan Neville play organ on, so I think it's a well representation of my upbringing on music, so that's what that record is about. I'm not going to say it was the hardest thing I ever did, because focusing on myself is something that I really, really never do, but I will say that I'm glad that I did it.
I always admire drummers who are not vocalists, who actually step outside their comfort zone to do that, because I think it's an expression of who you are. And to me, that's actually one of the bravest performances. I take great comfort in hiding behind the drum kit and not having to be the front person. And so the aspect of standing in front of the stage and singing, to me, terrifies me. So I have great respect for people that actually take the time to do that. And I definitely really admire and respect you for that experience.
Well, I do. I have a band that I put together that's been around, I guess, almost 4 years now, called Phatback, Earl, and Me.
Okay.
And I always and it's sort of a Tedeschi Trucks band if they would have signed with Stax Records or was more of a soul band.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. Tedeschi Trucks band plays soul and funk music probably better than any other band out there. But they are considered a roots band with blues, and so Phatback, Earl, and Me is more leaning towards the soul side of it. But I always tell people I put together that band so that I wouldn't have to play a drum solo. So anyways, all I'm doing is just chopping wood back in the back and cueing where different sections are supposed to go. So that's what that's all about.
So a question that I often like to end with is that when you look back throughout your career and your journey as a player, there's sometimes a definition of success that people have often early on in their career that sometimes changes as they reach later stages in their career. So for you, starting out, what was your definition of success, and has that changed throughout your life?
Well, I would say that it has curved. It's become different things. I never ever thought at one particular time that I would get a chance to play with my heroes, per se. Those people that I bought records on. When I bought my first album that I ever bought was a Herbie Hancock record, and so I was thinking, oh wow, if I could ever play with Herbie Hancock, that would be, I would have made it. Well, I played with Herbie Hancock. So if I could ever play with Kenny Loggins, then I've made it. Well, I played with Kenny Loggins, and not saying that I've made it. I have been successful in doing the things that I want to do. And I mean, I'm just leaning forward so that I can do more of that. If I can play with James Taylor, if I can play with Sting, if I can play with John Mayer, and I've worked with a lot of people who have worked with those people. Mm-hmm. That's that, along with making a living doing the thing that, you love doing. It hasn't changed. I mean, no, I'm always looking for that sort of excitement, that sort of thing. And once again, not saying dig me, but just saying, wow, here I am. I'm helping support those artists that I grew up listening to. So that's what success is, and that's what I think it will continue to be.
When I started this podcast, one of the things that I really started to do was sort of grow a community. And through those experiences, what I found is the most valuable aspect of our career and our lives is the community and the connections and the relationships that we build with people, because through that community, we're going to get opportunities. Through that community, we're going to have other like-minded individuals who are going to be there to cheer us on when we get to that next level, and also to pick us up and push us back up the ladder when we fall off those experiences. And I'm very blessed for the community that I have built, and it has been an absolute honor for me to get an opportunity to not only connect with you today after being such a fan, but to invite you into part of my community. Herman, it's been an absolute pleasure.
You know what? Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for making this happen. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Drummer's Pathway podcast. Please share and subscribe, get the word out, and let's keep the discussion going. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.